been multiple Lex Luthors throughout the years, convoluting the extensive history of this character, but amidst all these versions, one was far more maniacal than the rest. Starting out as your everyday criminal, Lex Luthor would rise up to become one of the most iconic villains in comic book history, considered the nemesis of one of the greatest heroes ever, Superman. Who do you think is the greatest hero ever? And do you think Lex is actually Superman's main nemesis, or who would you propose instead? How did a mere man accomplish such a feat? And what motivated Luthor to behave so ruthlessly initially? Let's talk about that. Today we'll be focusing on the very first version of Lex Luthor and his history. This Luthor was retrospectively referred to as Earth 2 Luthor. However, back in the day, we would have just known him simply as Luthor, or Alexi Luthor. That's how he started out in the comics before there was any established continuity involving the multiverse, at least. Or really much established continuity at all back in those days. Luthor made his first appearance back in Action Comics issue number 23 back in 1940. He was created by some of the founding fathers of comic book history over at DC Comics, the creative duo of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. With his first appearance in Action Comics issue 23, he planned to instigate a war in Europe to gain power himself. Now, this was all intended to take place prior to World War II, by the way, in the comics. Although I'm sure World War II would have actually acted as some form of inspiration for this story, as this comic was released in 1940, only a few short months after World War II had started in 1939. So what exactly was Luthor's plan for this? Well, he hoped to start a war between the fictional countries of Gallonia and Tehran by sabotaging the peace conference happening between those two nations. In this issue, Luthor seems to be somewhat of a mysterious figure. Who is he? What does he do? Almost cult-like in appearance, garbed in a large red robe. He operates from a floating city of his own creation, suspended in the sky by a massive dirigible. And if you don't know what a dirigible is, it's basically just like a flying device, like basically a fancy hot air balloon. It's fancier than that though. One of his goons is also prominently featured, who is bald. But don't get him mixed up for Luthor, who actually has a full head of red hair here. He wouldn't be established as bald until later on in his history, and we'll get to both the historical and the canonical origin of that bit of business later on in this video. Initially, Lois and Clark plan to stop Luthor, but Lois gets kidnapped in a classic typical Golden Age twist. So classic. So many ladies getting kidnapped back in the day. As such, she gets a note out to Clark calling for his help. Disguised as Superman, Clark answers her call, saving Lois and defeating Luthor, who by the end of this issue has seemingly died, as Superman causes his flying city and the dirigible carrying it to crash. Don't worry though, he wasn't actually dead. That would have made for a very short video, so it keeps going. Following his apparent demise in his first appearance in Action Comics issue number 23, Lex turns up again only a month later in Superman issue number 4. In this issue, Luthor hatches two separate schemes. One in which he steals an earthquake-creating ray, planning to use it to create mass destruction and bend the Earth and its inhabitants to his will. However, his plan is foiled when Superman destroys the ray, defeating him. The creator of the weapon, Professor Martinson, the only man who could ever make another ray like this, apparently takes his own life to prevent the ray from ever being recreated again. Tragically, what he didn't know is that villains would still manage to threaten the Earth with earthquakes of their own creation, even after this in the future. So it's kind of a sad sacrifice from Professor Martinson there. The second scheme involves Luthor creating a bunch of prehistoric monsters, which he plans to use to invade and conquer Earth, with his new base being in another city of his creation, this time on a sunken and lost island known as Pacifico. Of course, Superman also prevents this from coming to pass, leaving Luthor to face his own monstrous creations who destroy him, ending him once and for all. Wait, no they don't, because next issue he's back again in Superman issue number 5. In this issue, Luthor plans to basically use hypno gas to brainwash world leaders and other influential figures, a lot of businessmen basically, so he can bring about a nationwide depression, once more to bend the Earth to his will so he might conquer it. Superman stops this from happening too, giving him chase even when Luthor reveals that he actually hit a plane in half of the building and detaches that part of the building, like it literally just breaks apart, taking a section of that building with him as he flies off, trying to escape. This time though, it's the end of Luthor. But no, once again, it isn't. In case you haven't already guessed, Luthor seemingly dying at the end of each adventure became a pretty tried and true trope for the character in his early days, with him always seemingly being permanently defeated, only to return shortly thereafter. Comics, am I right? At this point, Luthor was annoyed by Superman, but he didn't really have anything personal against Superman. He didn't hate him because, he was an alien or because of any of his personal ties to Supes in the past. His motivations seemed to purely be about gaining power and domination over the world, or at least parts of the world, but Superman kept getting in his way, so he decided the best thing to do to achieve his goal was to kill Superman, because he kept getting in his way. This would then become a motivation for Luthor, seeing Superman as a roadblock that needed to be removed so that his ambitions could be actually attained. For real this time, Like, he just wants to have a plan that isn't foiled. Fair enough. I mean, not really in the sense that he's trying to destroy parts of the world, but I get it. He's just like, man, I just want one plan to go right. At this point, Lex also still had a full head of hair. While it isn't always colored correctly, it was intended to be a head full of luscious ginger locks. Something that we've also seen return before in the comics when it comes to how Lex has been depicted throughout the years. However, about a year after his first appearance, he went bald. Why? How? Well, this change actually was the result of a creative accident. Yeah, he was accidentally drawn without hair in a comic strip by Leo Nowak, and the change simply stuck. It's possible that Nowak was confused as to who the character was based on Lex's first appearance, where, like I said, a bald goon of Luthor's was also prominently featured in the issue. In terms of character history, in the 1960s in Adventure Comics issue 271, we'd be given the canonical explanation of Lex Luthor losing his hair when he was younger as a result of Superboy, a younger version of Superman, saving his life. Superboy had used his super breath, I believe, to basically blow out a fire, which accidentally resulted in Lex's hair being blown off. Even more tragically, Lex at the time was trying to conjure up basically an antidote for kryptonite for Superboy. Before this incident, Lex had basically been a huge fan of Superboy and his heroics. This retcon in his origin made his vendetta against Superman a personal one. Of course, while at the time we may have suspected that this Luthor was simply a retconned version of the Golden Age character, the only Luthor we'd really ever known, or so we thought at that time, it would later be established that this wasn't even the same Luthor. This would be established as a different version of the character entirely. We'll come back to that evolution in a bit though. From here, Luthor, now bald and looking almost identical to his henchman who first appeared along with him in Action Comics issue number 23, had a bunch of other schemes that he tried in an attempt to defeat Superman. In Action Comics issue number 47, one scheme involved an item known as the Power Stone, which would allow Luthor to possess powers as great, if not greater, than Superman, all while siphoning away Superman's powers. Ha ha ha. However, Superman managed to defeat Luthor, this time tricking him by giving him an imitation of the stone and then roughing him up. He was like, you thought I gave you the stone? I didn't give you the stone. That's plastic. Eventually, Lex Luthor would learn of Superman's weakness to kryptonite in this era and attempt to use a meteorite to defeat him. Now, back to his full head of red hair in terms of his design, Luthor learned of Soup's weakness from Dan Rivers, a con man and a criminal, who just so happened to actually stumble upon this weakness in his own fight against Superman, and who was actually one of the first villains to ever use kryptonite against Superman. Luthor once again failed in his pursuit to defeat Superman, but he did manage to get a pretty good consolation prize in this one. Alexia had revealed Superman's weakness to the world, which would allow future villains to use this against the hero. Alexi would later be approached by the Lex Luthor of Earth-1, known initially as Lexus Luthor, before being renamed as Alexander Luthor. This was the Silver Age Lex. This Lex proposed that he and Luthor swap places in an effort to defeat each other's Superman. And this is also where things get really confusing in our history lesson. Going back to the origin of Luthor losing his hair, it would later be established that this origin belonged to Silver Age Lex. In fact, the whole time, it had been Silver Age Lex's origin. Dun dun dun. However, we actually wouldn't really learn of this till after the fact, because Earth-1 and Earth-2, the Silver Age and the Golden Age of DC Comics respectively, weren't really established as being separate until 1961's The Flash issue number 123, with them being given the names of Earth-1 and Earth-2 even later in 63, whereas Luthor's hair origin appeared in 1960. See what I mean? It's a little confusing, and I imagine when you were reading it at the time, people would have been like, wait, what's happening? Just learning there were two Earths, I'm sure, would break people's minds. Hence why I decided to still include this point in my video. It's important to remember that before 1963, before 1961, continuity wasn't a major thing at DC. Luthor was Luthor, Superman was Superman, and each adventure was kind of its own story. We didn't really worry too much about the contradiction or continuity until later on in comics history. There just wasn't much reason for publishers, writers, or readers really to concern themselves with it at the time, and it wasn't as closely scrutinized as it is today. Lex's hair origin would be even more firmly cemented as belonging to the Silver Age counterpart when it reappeared in a flashback in issue 292 of Superman in the 1970s. Also interesting that this was the same volume of Superman, of course, that it started off with the Golden Age Earth 2 Supes as its main character, because back then we didn't stop and start volumes every year or two for a new creative team, or even a continuity reset in this case. We just kept going. Legacy issues, baby. We still have them today. We still call back to them. During the team up with Earth 1 Lex, Luthor is shown as even more ruthless, not just targeting Superman alone and wanting to kill him, but also extending his wrath to Superman's friends, colleagues, and loved ones. And DC Comics presents annual issue number 1 after he learned that Superman worked at the Daily Star, yes, the Daily Star at that time, not the Daily Planet. Luthor aimed a missile strike at their offices, hoping to kill those who were closest to the hero simply to hurt him. Of course, this plan was thwarted, but it turned out that this plan was kinda just a setup for another plan to target Lois specifically and send Superman immobile into space. Fortunately, Superman was also too smart for that plan, and once again, he defeated Luthor. In the same issue, both Luthor's defeats caused them to retreat to Earth 3, where they ally with the evil version of Superman, Ultraman. Luthor takes the role of leader here and suggests they simply destroy both Earth 1 and Earth 2 to defeat both Supermen for good, alarming even Silver Age Lex with his plan. Silver Age Lex was like, look, I'm evil, but that's another level of evil. You're gonna destroy whole worlds? This plan, however, is fortunately foiled by the team-up of Earth 1 and Earth 2 Superman and the heroic Alexander Luthor of Earth 3. Alexi would appear finally during Crisis on Infinite Earths in a team-up once more with Earth 1 Lex and Brainiac. While Earth 1 Lex Luthor would be known for his iconic team-ups with Brainiac in his continuity, Earth 2 Luthor was more known for palling around and scheming with villains like Toyman and Prankster. Hence why when he argued with Brainiac that as Earth 1 Lex was made one of Brainiac's generals, his commander specifically, so should Luthor too, because he's also smart. In fact, he's smarter than Earth 1 Lex. Brainiac, though, simply responds by disintegrating him, saying that he really only needed one Luthor, so farewell. Also, what a simple end to a character that had such a long history and continuity. Just disintegrated. And on the third page or something. It's really early too in that issue of Crisis on Infinite Earths. While Golden Age Luthor was maniacal in his approach, willing to destroy whole worlds in the end in his effort to take out Superman, Silver Age Lex had an even more mad science vibe to him, creating elaborate plots that were less about getting Superman out of the way so he could conquer the world, and honestly more about his own personal, often petty, vendetta against the hero. Almost from the get-go, I'd say. If you want to hear more about this even denser and more wild history of Silver Age Lex, let me know in the comments. Silver Age was also admittedly a really fun time for the development of Lex Luthor's character and would also inform the Prime Earth continuity where we're at right now.
They say love makes you do crazy things, so hatred makes someone positively insane. Case in point, Lex Luthor. Number 5, baby trapping Superman. We're starting off strong, and this one is at the top because it doesn't feel that insane anymore because I've gotten used to it. Connor Kent's origin story is still one of the strangest in DC history, and you have to admire that when you take into consideration everyone he's up against. Lex deciding to mix his DNA with Clark Kent's to create Connor and essentially baby trap Superman is something that only Lex Luthor could come up with. I don't even think the Joker would go there. In fact, the only other case that I can think of off the top of my head is Talia with Bruce, but even then it depends on the writer for whether or not that was intentional. They say there's a thin line between love and hate, and Lex Luthor is a trapeze artist. I can't wait for James Gunn to bring Connor Kent to the big screen because I know that James Gunn is not going to change anything about his backstory and casual audiences are just going to lose their minds. 4. Adventure Comics Volume 2, Issue 6. Lex Luthor will do anything to maintain his power or like the illusion that he has it, and that includes hurting his own family. In this issue, Lex's sister is sick and Superboy is going through the crisis of wanting to be like his dad, Superman, and not like his other evil dad, Lex Luthor. Lex essentially goes on his like usual monologue about how Superman holds him back from doing good and miracles and solving world hunger, whatever. Superboy essentially says, well, Superman's off world right now, so do something nice, and Lex is like, okay. So Luthor decides to cure his sister's disease, potentially cancer, and then he reinfects her after. He sent Superboy on this huge quest to go get all these ingredients, caused a family reunion, cured an incurable disease, just to take it all back simply to prove that he could. I wish I was lying, but when Superboy was like, Lex, why did you do that? He said, Lex giveth and Lex taketh away, which is deranged. He is deranged. So I would love it if he would stop talking in third person like he is God and just simply get a grip. 3. The daycare incident. Lex Luthor Man of Steel was a wild ride, but the most famous incident has to be Lex hiring Toyman to detonate a daycare. Technically, it was a jeweler's that Toyman actually blew up, but it was in the same building as this daycare, and the care center was like the actual target in the plan. It was part of this big plan that Lex had where he was trying to sway public opinion against Superman. To add more to this equation, Toyman was on a registered list of people that really shouldn't be around young people. 2. Project Blackout. This is recent actually, like 2023. Context, Superman had revealed his identity to the world at this point and Lex is mad at him. Lex comes up with Project Blackout. So he's going to take Manchester Black and completely drain his powers, eliminating him in the pursuit of hurting Superman. Using Manchester Black's powers, Lex makes everyone in the world forget his identity reveal, and if they find out again, they would have an aneurysm and fall into a coma. We know this because Perry White is in a coma for this reason. The only people not affected by this was Clark's family because they were all on the Kent farm before Perry showed up having dinner, and the superheroes because they had previously placed mental defenses from Martian Manhunter. But still, like, Clark has to keep his identity locked down out of fear for harming the rest of the world. And now Luthor can just hold that over his head like, if you don't do what I want, I will tweet your secret identity and decimate the Earth's population. In the end, him and his son John learn to enjoy living the anonymous life again. We do have an honorable mention because I love this. Lex stealing 40 cakes, which is as many as 4 tens, and that's terrible. Coming from a DC children's book teaching counting, this panel of Lex Luthor teaching the number 40 by stealing 40 cakes went viral and became a meme. It later became actual canon though in Superman 709 when Lex got detention for stealing the 40 cakes from the school bake sale as revenge against his school. Number 1, dooming the entire universe. Okay, like he didn't actually like doom anything, but he did have the power to essentially fix everything negative and make the universe paradise. The problem was he couldn't hurt Superman anymore, which is not a deal that Lex Luthor is ever willing to take. Okay, so basically after this long run, a being of absolute power gave his powers to Lex Luthor. The only condition was they couldn't be used for anything negative, and if he did, then he would lose them. So in exchange for the entire universe living in a state of bliss, Lex had to stop trying to maim Superman, and that was asking too much of him. Lex decided it would be better to use his new powers to destroy Superman once and for all, or at least try until the powers ran out. In the end, Luthor lost his memories and also released 3 Doomsdays as a failsafe, which is just so special.
In at number 10, helps the Justice League. Back in 2003, there was an episode of the Justice League titled A Better World, in which Lex Luthor becomes the president of the United States. After he kills the Flash though on an alternate world, Superman takes revenge by killing Luthor, but following that, the Justice Lords come in and take over the world. After they make contact with the Justice League, their next target becomes Earth. The Lex Luthor of the television show's prime reality reality is still viewed as a criminal, but Superman actually asks for his assistance in taking down the Justice Lords. Lex then uses this device called the Energy Disruptor that ultimately renders the Justice Lords powerless, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it, and on top of saving the planet, he also agrees not to use the device on the Justice League. How nice of him. In at number 9, liberated slaves. Grant Morrison's Final Crisis brought in the villain Libra, who sought to take back society by reforming the secret society of supervillains. Try saying that 5 times fast. In doing so, Libra creates a team of evildoers bigger, badder, and more dangerous than ever before. Together they planned a whole host of evil activities for their team building workshop, which included killing Martian Manhunter, bombing the Daily Planet, and throughout all of these moments, Lex Luthor was at the center. However, once Lex realized that Darkseid was actually instructing Libra's actions, Luthor started to question everything. Libra then turns on many of the villains by fitting them with the Justifier helmets, which essentially turn them into mindless drones under his control. Together with Dr. Sivana, Lex defeats Libra and ends up freeing the world from his mind control slavery. In at number 8, finds a cure. After Forever Evil, Lex actually joined the Justice League, and back in 2014, there was a storyline called the Amazo virus. The virus was this deadly outbreak that would infect people with dangerous superpowers before finally killing them. As the chaos is unfolding, Lex Luthor was doing his best to find a cure for all of this. And in an odd turn of events, it's revealed that Luthor was the one who created the virus in his attempts to kill Superman. Superman wasn't exactly happy about this and demanded that he be removed from the team. The ironic thing was that in order to stop this virus meant to kill Superman, Lex needed Superman's blood to successfully find a cure, so he created a virus to kill the Man of Steel, but he also cured the virus, so I suppose that's pretty heroic? In at number 7, kills his evil counterpart. At the peak of Forever Evil, we had our heroic Lex Luthor fighting against his evil twin from Earth 3 known as Alexander Luthor. Alexander was essentially an evil Shazam. He could use the powers of Maza to steal others' powers to kill his enemies. Both Deathstorm and Bizarro were killed by Alexander, and then he set his sights on Lex. Lex Luthor had the brilliant idea though of using the fact that they sound the same against the evil Luthor. Using his own voice, he calls down the lightning to rip away all of Maza's powers. Now being nothing more than a mere mortal, Lex was able to kill Alexander before he could get his powers back. Again, saving the day. In at number 6, he rebuilt Gotham. In the event known as Cataclysm in 1998, a massive earthquake had struck the city of Gotham, wiping out most of the city. The government made the tough decision to just abandon Gotham and lock it down. What was left in its wake was dozens of villains running rampant in the city, and the Dark Knight being the only source of heroism left to save the remaining citizens. Now introduce Gotham's savior, Lex Luthor. Due to the incredible resources that Luthor's company LexCorp has, he was able to come in and rebuild the city in a very short period of time. This act of kindness made people across America really start to love Lex Luthor, and ultimately it's what boosted his career as a politician. In at number 5, stop Zod's invasion. In the comic book Superman Last Son of Krypton, an invasion of the Phantom Zone criminals commences and introduces Zod, Non, Ursa, and their army of Kryptonians. This evil squad destroy a lot of the city of Metropolis while Superman is trapped inside of the Phantom Zone. Lex Luthor has always been known for his hatred of Kryptonians, so the fact that he could flex his years of torturing Superman and actually apply what he's learned was more than welcomed. To undertake such a task though, Luthor first enlists the help of Parasite, Bizarro, and Metallo, forming a revenge squad to fight off Zod and his pals. Once Superman makes his way back to Earth, Lex essentially gives him no other option than working with him to end this invasion. In at number 4, the savior of Lexor. First appearing in Superman number 164 back in 1963, there was a little planet that would soon be renamed Lexor. What began as simply a location for Lex and Superman to fight each other one-on-one because the location depowers Superman soon turned into something much more. Lex Luthor ends up becoming the leader of the people that inhabited the planet after he helps them unlock their lost technology and ultimately restructure their society. Superman even helps Lex find this planet some water and stabilize their planet's core. Lex is branded as a hero for these actions, and as such the world is renamed Lexor and Luthor becomes the ruler of their society. Rightfully so, he found them some water. In at number 3, saves countless lives. Forever Evil is exactly how it sounds, a lot of evil things happening, and perhaps one of the worst was when a crime syndicate had not only captured Nightwing, but unmasked him on live television. To make matters worse, when Lex Luthor and Batman finally locate Nightwing, he's being held captive by a contraption called the Murder Machine. Not too much sunshine and hope when you're being held down by something called a murder machine. Originally the machine was meant to imprison Doomsday, but now strapped to Dick Grayson, it is set to explode unless Nightwing dies. The only option in the eyes of Luthor is to stop Grayson's heart in order to stop the bomb from taking countless countless lives. Batman, of course, doesn't agree with this approach at all and attacks Luthor for killing his quote-unquote son. But we soon find out that Lex has more control over this matter than we were ever led to believe. After saving everyone and deactivating the bomb, Luthor simply uses his super suit to jolt Nightwing's heart back into working order. So just chill, Batman. Lex Luthor is here to save the day. You can take a break. Sit down. And at number 2, achieves world peace. In Superman Red Son, a world is imagined wherein which the last son of Krypton lands in Soviet Russia instead of America. In this alternate reality, Superman takes control of the government under Joseph Stalin, creates a utopia out of this empire. On the flip side, Lex Luthor becomes America's leading scientist and plans to take down the Soviets' alien weapon that threatens the safety of the United States. Eventually, Lex Luthor becomes the United States president and leads the charge in fighting the Soviet invasion. Once the American public believes that Lex has defeated the Russian Superman, he establishes his own philosophy of Lutheranism not just in the US, but around the world. In a strange turn of events, life on Earth actually improves and worldwide peace becomes possible under this new leadership by Lex Luthor. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, defeated Darkseid. Back in 2006, there was an episode of the show Justice League Unlimited called Destroyer, where Lex Luthor saves the Earth from Darkseid. Before this, Darkseid is leading an invasion with the express purpose of destroying the planet. With the assistance of Metron, Luthor travels to the other side and enters the source to bring the anti-life equation back to Earth. Unbeknownst to Batman and Superman, this anti-life equation is something that Darkseid wanted more than even taking over the Earth. This was the ultimate heroic act by Lex Luthor because not only did he save Superman from certain death, but he gave up his own life just to defeat Darkseid.